So, everything we know so far about the new TKO Boxing League, from payments to potential problems. One of the contracts reviewed by Boxing Scene showed both the purse structure and the intended reliance on company rankings, although Turki Al-Sheikh clarified in a recent speaking appearance on X that the new league's rankings would be separate from those traditionally posted for all weight classes by the Ring magazine, which he owns. So to read that again, one of the contracts reviewed by Boxing Scene showed both the purse structure and the intended reliance on company rankings, although Al-Sheikh clarified in a recent speaking appearance on X that the new league's rankings would be separate from those traditionally posted for all weight classes by the Ring magazine, which he owns. The fighters who join commit to a 3-year term following their first bout and must stay on board for 2 years following their signing, described as the effective date in the contract. The contract stipulates that purses will be increased based on the fighter's ability to crack the top 10 of the company and climb the rankings. $20,000 for a 10-round bout by an unranked fighter. $50,000 when ranked by the company at number 5 to number 10. $125,000 when ranked by the company at number 3 to number 4. $375,000 when challenging for company championship, and $750,000 when defending company championship. Some veteran fight officials canvassed by Boxing Scene said this pay scale indicates these TKO League fighters will be younger and mid-level boxers. The TKO contract did add some flexibility on earnings as the league fighter advances their career. When boxer participates in a bout, which is the main event of a company event and distributed on pay-per-view in the US, the parties shall agree on a guaranteed purse and or a net profit participation. If company secures opportunities for boxer to participate on third-party events, for example, Riyadh season events, boxer shall be entitled to 90% of the fee paid to the company for boxer's participation. Boxing officials are expected to meet with TKO and White next week to gain a fuller understanding of how the league will operate. As a Hualapai? God, how do you pronounce that? Hualapai? I'm going to go with Hualapai, right? Hualapai Ventures representative, as a Hualapai rewind, as a Hualapai Ventures representative has told at least one US-based commission head that the promotion will be looking to gain its license soon. So let's go over some of these details here. First of all, the league's rankings will be separate from the Ring magazine rankings, because some people had speculated that Ring magazine rankings could be the league rankings. Apparently not, according to this article on Boxing Scene. The fighters who join commit to a 3-year term following their first bout and must stay on board for 2 years following their signing, described as the effective date in the contract. So understand what this means, folks. The contract, the 3-year term, doesn't begin until after they have their first bout. So potentially you could have certain fighters signing up and for whatever reason not having their first bout, okay? And therefore sitting on the shelf for a bit before eventually having it. And then from that point on, they've got 3 years to go. So you could get locked in for a very, very, very long time indeed. All right. Now, in traditional boxing contracts, especially if you're a fighter of any kind of value, yes, you will be required to fight a certain number of times in your contract, but your promoter will be required to give you a certain amount of activity, give you a certain amount of opportunities within your contract. I don't know whether that's going to be the case with this boxing league, and that's important because there needs to be a commitment on both sides. It can't just be the promoter can, get you out as often or as little as he likes, and there's no contractual consequences for him. But you must fulfill the obligation of, staying on board for 2 years after your first bout. So understand what that means. Now, as far as the fighter's ability to crack the top 10 and climb the rankings, we don't know what the criteria is going to be. In UFC, there may be a lot of politics, where if Dana White doesn't like you, will you crack the top 10? Dana White comes across as quite a spiteful guy. And here, there's also the possibility of something like that happening. And that, from a fighter's perspective, is the benefit of having 4 sanctioning bodies, because there's less chance for sanctioning body politics to get in the way of your ascent. If one sanctioning body doesn't want to rank you in their top 10, another one probably will. Whereas when it's one organization like this, if Dana White don't like you, if you've upset him somehow, if you're not willing to take the money that's on offer, you may not climb the rankings. Now, as far as these purses, 20 grand for a 10-round bout by an unranked fighter, these are not too dissimilar from boxing, to be honest with you, up to a certain point. And bear in mind, there's no weight stipulation here. We're hearing that they're going to chop it down to like the traditional 8 weight classes rather than having the 17 or 18 if you include bridgerweight that currently exists in boxing. They're going to chop it down to 8. And the reason I say that is because, or the reason I mention weight classes is because in boxing, traditionally, the smaller guys in the lower weight classes get paid less than the bigger guys. That's just the way that the market chips fall, right? It's not like a systematic thing where promoters want to pay bigger fighters more money. No, it just so happens that the public tend to be more engaged by bigger fighters, generally speaking. That's why heavyweights tend to get paid more than anybody else. The public feels like bigger is better, you see? Whereas in this payment structure, there's no mention of, let's say, heavyweights getting more than fighters in the lower weight classes. It would seem, as it stands right now, to apply to all weight classes. Okay, so they've got some kind of parity there. So the 20,000 for an unranked fighter, that's not that unusual in boxing. But when you get into the top 10, 50 grand for a fighter ranked from number 5 to number 10 is low. Okay, 125 grand, at least for traditionally, bigger fighters, that's a low amount of money. If you're in the top 10 to be only getting 50 grand, let's say you're a heavyweight, that's chicken change. 125 grand for number 3 and number 4 for a bout. Again, this is quite low pay for certainly heavyweights. Lower down the weight classes, it wouldn't be too bad. 375 grand when challenging for the company championship, a world title. There are many challengers in boxing today, outside of this ecosystem, obviously, that are getting that kind of purse for challenging for a world title in, as I say, various weight classes. In heavyweight, that would be quite low. In this day and age, I think below market rate. But during the Klitschko era, for example, purses of that size were pretty commonplace for challengers. Yeah, the Klitschkos were misers. They were not trying to pay people a decent purse. They were keeping all the money and giving you a pittance, a relative pittance. Now, 750 grand for defending the championship, for basically being a world champion, and your title defense is 750 grand, that is awful. Okay? There's no doubt that's awful. If you're making that kind of money as a world champion in boxing today, you're looking at your promoter, you're looking at everyone, and you're thinking, no, there's something seriously wrong here. I mean, for a champion to be getting purses like that in this day and age would be a shocker. Now, maybe down at minimum weight, some obscure champions in the lighter weight classes, they might be getting paid these type of purses. But anyone who is anyone is getting way more than this. Deontay Wilder at one point was an obscure champion before he fought Fury, before he struck up the rivalry with Anthony Joshua, and he was getting like 2 or 3 mil a fight. Just to put it in perspective, when he was unknown, when he could walk down the street in most American cities and not be recognized, he was making like at least 2 million a fight. Over double what the champion under this purse structure would get paid in the TKO Fight League. So that's a shocker, okay? However, it says here that the TKO contract did add some flexibility on earnings as the league fighter advances their career. When boxer participates in a bout, which is the main event, so we have to be clear here, only if the fighter is the main event will this apply, and only if it's on pay-per-view in the US. The parties shall agree on a guaranteed purse and or a net profit participation. But you see, agreeing with Dana White, TKO, Turki, Al Sheikh on your purse is contingent on how much leverage you have. If you're under long-term contract with this organization, presumably you're not going to have much leverage. Do you know what I mean? Today, a fighter can, enter a negotiation with a fellow fighter, a rival. And let's say they're both with different promotional companies. That will drive the fighter's purse up. It can even go to a purse bid. And people other than the two promoters of the fighters can get involved, which again drives the purse up. But here, when it's all in-house, I'm not sure what kind of leverage a fighter would really have to, negotiate a purse in this scenario. Anyway, it says, if company secures opportunities for boxer to participate on third-party events, Riyadh season events, etc., boxers shall be entitled to 90% of the fee paid to the company for the boxer's participation. Now, that's high, okay? 90% is a very good split for the boxer. That's actually a higher split than a boxer would get today. Today, the promoter would take, 20%, 25%, between 15 and 25%. Let's put it there. So this is only 10% that the company would take if the boxer participates in a Riyadh season event. But again, which boxers would get the opportunity? Bear in mind, Riyadh season events are controlled by Turki, Al Sheikh, and the Saudis. So you're still at their mercy as to who they want to allow to participate in this event to get the 90% money, right? So the boxing league here is going to have an awful lot of control, which is what it's all about with the UFC model. But I'm not aware of the UFC model having anything like this in there, whereby you can fight outside of the UFC organization and get 90% of the money. So that is something that's in there, but how that will be implemented and who they'll give that opportunity to is a mystery. And just to reiterate, when it comes to pay-per-view, getting a split of that under this model, you would have to be the main event fighter. Think about some of these Riyadh season cards where you've got a stacked event with loads of world title fights and loads of A-list fighters on there. Under this structure, only the guy or the two guys in the main event would be eligible to get a cut of the pay-per-view revenue. So bear that in mind. Anyway, since boxing officials are expected to meet with TKO and White next week to gain a fuller understanding of how the league will operate. So let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments. Let's get to the comments here. Just check in case there's any more super chats. I don't want to miss anything here. Nope, last one was from Chili Beef. Shout out to Chili Beef every time. All right, let's get into this discussion. Feed Khabib says, if anyone thinks a boxing scene dossa journalist has the blueprint to Turkey's league, then yikes. Well, the boxing scene journalist has spoken to fighters, apparently, who've been tapped by Turkey Al-Sheikh's boxing league. And I guess shown a contract or a provisional contract, and they're spilling the beans. That's what it seems to be. The final boss says Larry Holmes becoming IBF champ and giving up the other belts was what helped it too, indeed. Afro Jam says Holmes refused to fight against Marvis Fraser. Well, he fought Marvis Fraser. He knocked out Marvis Fraser in the first round. I remember he didn't want to fight him, but he did fight him and knocked him out in one. It was a great right hand that put Marvis Fraser down. And when he got up, Larry Holmes waded into him, but he was calling the referee over to stop the fight, saying, "Don't make me beat this boy up." Shout out to High Road Protagonist. He says, has Turkey showed his hand too soon? Maybe. Shout out to Ty. He says, I'm late, but it's Bruiser. Get me, get me, get me. Punch Quote says, boxers only keep about 40 to 45% after manager, trainer, and taxes. Indeed. But even if they keep that amount, it's still more, at least at the top end in boxing, than the UFC fighters are getting paid. Far more. And as far as Turkey showing his hand too soon, the thing about Turkey is that being an advisor to the royal court, so he's basically a Saudi noble, these people are not used to being questioned. They're not used to people going behind their back, if you will, and what have you. They're not used to the cut and thrust of Western business. And so they can be a little naive because they're used to people basically being afraid, right? And in Western business, nobody's afraid. People will do all sorts of stuff that you don't want them to do. You don't have the control that you would have, you know, dealing with people in Saudi Arabia when you are a noble, a member of the royal court. So, yeah, I think Turkey's been caught off guard several times already, and that's why he's doing the backtracking. The shout out to High Road Protagonist. Pennant says, do you think boxing will get bigger than UFC? Boxing's already bigger than UFC. Boxing's far bigger than UFC. There's never been a time the UFC has got bigger than boxing, globally. In America, UFC has been bigger than boxing, but globally, boxing's always been bigger than UFC. Bexy says, Hatman, do you think Dana knows the UFC is sinking? I think he knows that boxing has taken the play away from UFC over the past 12 to 18 months. Yes. And that's why there's the impetus for him to get into boxing at this stage. He's wanted to get into boxing for a number of years, but I think the timing is indicative of the shift. Afro Jam says he also refused to fight Page. He then vacated because they wanted to pay him less than the Fraser fight. Okay, he's talking about Larry Holmes. Shout out to KB for the super chat. He says, Hatman, which elite boxer had the ugliest style? It depends what you mean by elite. But if we're just talking about world champions, because elite is like, some people would say it's not just a regular world champion. It's like an all-time great world champion. And that I'd have to do some deep thinking about that one. But if we're just talking about world champions, some of the ugliest styles I've seen were Sam Solomon. Any of you guys seen Sam Solomon? Horrible style, awful. Sakio Bika, yep, I agree with that one. Black Dynamite, Sakio Bika was a mess. But Sam Solomon was actually worse than Sakio Bika stylistically. Honestly, Sam Solomon's style was so awful. There was no rhythm there at all. It was just totally disjointed and ugly as hell. Sam Solomon is the epitome of an overachiever. A guy like that with really no natural boxing ability becoming a world champion was pretty damn incredible. Sam Solomon from Australia, I believe he was. Yeah, horrible style, but did very well with such a lack of natural talent. Sakio Bika, very ugly style as well. There was another guy back in the days who fought Roy Jones and many others called Murky Sosa. I think he was Colombian, Murky Sosa. He had an ugly style too. Tom is saying worse than Valuev. Way worse than Valuev. Go look up Sam Solomon. All you need to do is watch one round of him fighting. Hideously ugly style. Awful. Sam Solomon's style made Valuev look like Floyd Mayweather or something. That's how smooth he made Valuev look. Seriously. Horrific. Who else had an ugly style that I can think of now at championship level? Definitely Bika, Sam Solomon. Dennis Andrews had a pretty ugly style. Yeah, Andrews is a pretty ugly stylist when it comes to boxing. John Ruiz definitely didn't have the prettiest style, did he? Any of you guys watched John Ruiz back in the days? He had an ugly style, constantly clinching. Somebody mentioned Vlad. Trust me, John Ruiz's style made Vlad look like Sugar Ray Leonard. John Ruiz was just awful to watch. Yeah, Lawrence Okolie at his worst is a horrible fighter to watch as well, but I wouldn't put Okolie on the level of a Sam Solomon in terms of ugly style. Buddha Jesus says Barrera made Naz look terrible. Yeah, but Naz had a great style to watch generally, so you couldn't put Naz in that conversation. A shout out to Adam for the super chat. He says, how far do you think Erislandy Savon could have went if he turned pro? I think he certainly would have been cruiserweight champion. Erislandy Savon was mixing it with super heavyweights when he was really only a heavyweight, which in cruiserweight, which in the amateurs is the pro equivalent of cruiserweight. So, yeah, fighting 200-pound guys, I think Erislandy Savon would have been world champion for sure. Maybe even unified or undisputed. Erislandy Savon was very, very good. Is he still boxing? Or has he called it a day now because he must be getting up there in age? Presumably he's probably still boxing. Because what else is there to do in Cuba, right? Stephen Bell says Kelly Pavlik. No, Kelly Pavlik didn't have a terrible style. Kelly Pavlik was okay to watch. Okay, KB says Savon quit in 2020. Erislandy Savon, who is, what was he, the nephew of Felix? Was he the nephew? Adam Falk says Daniel Gill. Again, Gill's style was nowhere near as ugly as Sam Solomon. Shout out to Shurge for the super chat. He says, Dana says, boxing's broken as he hates playing fairly. Indeed. Boxing's flying right now. Doing way better than UFC. certainly outside the American market. But Dana has to sell the idea that he needs to come in and overhaul everything radically, you know? Chris Lewis says, you got no bars. I got loads of bars. Check out the Rumble channel with my old mixtape tracks on there. Crazy bars. Iron Fist says, okay, he's talking to trolls are bad. First Round Boxing says, just watching highlights of Holyfield versus Mercer. Underrated fight. And that was the first time that Ray Mercer was dropped in a professional fight, was against Evander Holyfield, of all people. But I do feel as though Mercer was a bit drained in that fight. I think he tried to lose too much weight because he didn't have the energy and the vigor against Holyfield that he had when he was heavier, like when he fought Lennox Lewis, for example. So I do think Holyfield overdid it with the weight loss. Maybe he tried to lose too much weight too quickly against Holyfield because he wasn't as strong as normal in that fight. Taking nothing away from Holyfield, but yeah. JR says Mercer was a hard night's work. Yeah, when Mercer was on it, he was a real hard night's work. He had quick hands, a good chin, he was a good puncher, had an underrated jab. JJ says mid-level guys will be happy with that pay, especially the smaller weights. Yeah, they probably will. But again, they're talking about having this league take over the whole of boxing. Not going to take over the whole of boxing with that pay structure. KB says, I remember when Mercer went into MMA, he won a fight in MMA, but then embarrassingly lost to Kimbo Slice by submission. Who's the guy that he knocked out in MMA? Was it Tim Silva? Anthony says, hey, Hatman, I did my first nightclub bouncer shift last week. When I got the gig, all I thought of was Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer. Hopefully you're working somewhere decent. You don't have a bunch of idiots that turn up and cause trouble. The doors are not as rough as they were back in the early 2000s, as I understand it, so you should be okay. The final boss says, Hatman, who have you got between Mercer and Tua? I think somebody asked this question the other day. I've never seen discussed, both very durable. Yeah, somebody did ask this question the other day. And who did I go with? I think I went with Tua on points because Mercer likes getting into a scrap too much. And I think that would favor Tua. Mercer, when he was really in shape, he could use his legs, but he never wanted to. He always wanted to exchange. So I'd go with Tua on points. Bear in mind, Tua lost to Ibeabuchi, but that was a very close competitive fight. And for me, Ibeabuchi was better. When I say close competitive fight, it was relatively close. You know, it was a definite win for Ibeabuchi. Nobody was questioning the result, but it was competitive. So for me, Ibeabuchi better than Ray Mercer, more skilled, more dimensional. So yeah, I'd go with Tua on points, a prime Tua. Not the Tua that fought Lennox Lewis. Dev says Mercer gave Lennox a great fight. He did too. Encircled says, funny thing is they had an agreement not to kick. Silva threw a kick and Mercer just slept him. The final boss says Tua versus Holyfield would have been interesting too. Great sparring prep for Mike Tyson. Yeah, that was one of, if not the main sparring partner that Holyfield had for Mike Tyson was David Tua. There's actually some footage of that you'll see on YouTube. I think it might still be up of Holyfield sparring Tua in prep for the first Mike Tyson fight. I can't remember if he was sparring him for the second Tyson fight, but he certainly sparred him for the first Mike Tyson fight. A Black Dynamite says, the only saving grace with this is that it's on Netflix. Well, yeah, that's going to be interesting, right? because WWE is now on Netflix since Vince McMahon sold his remaining shares in the company after the scandal. And of course, the expose of Vince McMahon was on Netflix too. It was kind of done as a way to basically show that, oh, WWE is a squeaky clean company now because McMahon's gone. The bad apple's gone. So they did that expose on Netflix. And then McMahon was completely out of the company. And this new guy, Khan, is taking over. So yeah, Netflix have got a massive reach. I mean, the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight did enormous numbers. Absolutely enormous numbers. Without having to do pay-per-view, because they were basically getting sign-ups for the lowest tier Netflix subscription, which is, I think, like £5 or £6 or something. And it was watched by, what was it, 60 million households, which is crazy. Am I getting the numbers wrong here, people? But Mike Tyson, Jake Paul was watched, I think, by, was it 30 million or 60 million households? It was an enormous number anyway. An enormous number. And that's households, not people, right? Because the average is going to be more than one person in every household watching. Afro Jam says, how do you think Lewis versus Holmes and Foreman would have done? Both the older versions and 90s versions. I reckon Lennox Lewis beats George Foreman, both versions, but I reckon he loses to Larry Holmes. Not the 90s version Holmes, but Prime Holmes, I reckon he loses on points. Larry Holmes was piston quick with a jab. He had a good right hand, he could move. He had good recuperative powers. Remember, he was only stopped once, and that was by Mike Tyson. If memory serves me right. Nobody else stopped him, did they? I don't think. He lost, many other fights to Oliver McCall, who kind of battered him. Holmes was ancient by then. And several others. But I think Mike Tyson was the only one to stop him. Black Dynamite says the viewership will be there. Yeah, for sure. Netflix have a crazy reach. And because of their economic model, their subscription model, they really don't need to do pay-per-view, They actually don't need to do pay-per-view because they get so many sign-ups on such a regular basis. And with the lowest tier sign-up, they got enormous numbers of people selecting that just to get access to the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight. Black Dynamite says, I think Turkey is hedging his bets with this TKO business, and he'd be smart too. Afro Jam says Netflix and Amazon Prime is the new TV. The UK government are trying to get TV license money from people watching live sports on them. Yeah, that's already started, hasn't it? Or is that yet to come in? As far as I was aware, that's already started. They're already demanding that if you watch Netflix, you pay for a TV license. But who the hell pays for a TV license? It's like the easiest thing in the world not to pay for without any consequences. I've never had a TV license in my life. Never. When I was still living in the UK, God, I used to get monthly letters from TV licensing. I didn't actually have a TV. But still, they didn't know that. And I would get monthly letters from TV licensing for years telling me that they're opening an investigation and they're investigating this and that. I'm like, man, this investigation's been going on for how many years now and you haven't... So basically, there is no investigation. It's all a bluff. Hence, who the hell pays for TV license? Ocean Blue says, I wouldn't pay that organization any money. Me neither. Even if I had a TV, I wouldn't pay that organization any money. But I didn't have one. But, I wasn't trying to talk to them, because once you start talking to them, then they'll say, well, are you watching live sports online? El Nino says, why did the Klitschko's never fight Valuev? Valuev was a Don King fighter. And I don't think Don King really wanted Valuev to get exposed by either of the Klitschko's. That's my best guess. Wow, Ireland says in Ireland you have to pay even with no TV. Dear, oh dear. Even worse. But one thing that Ireland does still have, just to talk a bit about economics and governments and whatnot for a second, for people who are looking to leave the UK because of the effery that's coming in with, they're really doing some stuff that's harsh on self-employed people, small businesses and so on. People who want to leave the UK and go live elsewhere, well, the current UK government is removing non-domicile status. So they're going to tax you worldwide, even if you live the majority of the year outside of the UK. Non-dom is gone. But in Ireland, they have retained the non-domicile status. So that's what I would recommend to British people who want to do the non-domicile thing is take up residency in Ireland, and then you can still live outside of Ireland, the majority of the year, not pay the taxes. Joe says it's a great thing. Tax these tax evaders. I completely disagree. I have an ideological opposition to mandatory income tax. It's extortion. That's what it is. Taxpayers have basically no say over where that money goes. It's spent on whatever the government deem they want to spend it on. Whether it be wars, whether it be, giving the royal family loads of money, whether it be all sorts of other ridiculous projects and things that you don't agree with. The public have got no recourse when the government just decides to spend their tax money on whatever they want to spend it with. So no, I completely disagree with that. Tax is just extortion. It's all it is. It's what criminal gangs do when they control areas. They run extortion rings. And that's been going on for thousands of years. All governments do is they scale it up and legitimize it, right? They make out as though it's okay because it's an easy way to raise money, isn't it? To extort people. So I completely disagree with mandatory income tax. Totally disagree with it. I agree with pay-as-you-go tax. You pay for what you use. That's the taxation that I advocate. Pay-as-you-go tax. I mean, in the United States, up until, World War I, there was no income tax, no federal income tax. In America, there are still some states that don't have state income tax, but I think everybody has fed income tax imposed upon them. Although there are some people, you can look on YouTube, who refuse to pay any kind of tax in America. And they've been doing it for years without consequence, seemingly. But you want to tread very carefully and know what you're doing before you end up in prison. Ishtashi says, money you've worked hard for going towards wars that you have nothing to do with. Indeed. Black Dynamite says they're starting to tax savings in the UK. Yeah, that too. I mean, the UK is just becoming a no-go zone right now. It's becoming a no-go zone. They're taking all your money off you. They're taking your savings. The tax is already ridiculously high as it is. Now they want to tax your worldwide income. Oh dear. Council tax going on, everything. It's terrible. So yeah, get out the UK. Get a residency elsewhere. Get a second passport if you can. Because it's all going down the drain, you know? The glory days of Britain are gone. Shout out to Matt, he says, got 5 letters through the door in one day this week. Now I am forced to pay an extra 200 quid a month every month, starting on the 1st, or I get thrown in prison. It's straight up extortion. Yep. E. Daniel says, respectfully, I disagree with your point on taxes. People can't choose every single item their money will contribute to that they benefited from. Yes, they can. You do realize there are several countries around the world where they do not have income tax at all. Successful countries, obviously the obvious example would be the UAE, the Gulf countries. They have no income tax. Now, the UAE have just started taxing businesses, but in terms of employees, they don't tax you. No income tax. Now that is not what I'm necessarily proposing, because not every country would be able to pull that off. It's dependent on their economy, on the resources, on the population size, and so on. But a voluntary tax system where you pay for what you use is absolutely implementable. Without a shadow of a doubt. You can definitely do that tax system, but of course, the establishment will convince you that you can't, because the current tax system gives them carte blanche. It's easier for them to use the current system, where they can just take your money and do whatever they want with it, and you have no recourse. They can promise you all sorts of stuff in the run-up to an election to get your vote, and then not do it. They are taking the absolute biscuit. Yeah, that's what most governments do. It's a joke. It's just a trumped up version of extortion. Literally what it is. It's terrible. Literally have to pay to be alive, you know? Encircled says income tax isn't needed as people spend money. All tax does is stagnate the economy. Yeah, you can get taxed in other ways, like sales taxes and stuff like that, which I don't necessarily have an issue with, per se. You know, you get taxed on what you buy, taxed on what you use, the services you use, and so on. I mean, America is to some extent like that. Obviously, with healthcare, in America, you have to pay as you go for healthcare. And, you know, there's a lot of demonization of the American healthcare system in Britain and in Europe. But really and truly, you look at the waiting lists on the NHS in America, people have health insurance, which is, they're paying pretty much the same as you would pay for national insurance, or actually less in some cases. And they don't have to wait for months or years to get an operation. They can get it immediately. So the NHS is over. It's finished. You know, it's finished. You're not getting the value from the NHS that you used to get at all. Juan says USA try to tax citizens abroad. It's BS. Yes, they do that, but now the UK are going to do that as well. They're also taxing citizens abroad. So, yeah. E. Daniel says, wouldn't the UAE be an exception because they're an oil-rich nation? Would all countries be able to benefit from no taxes? The UAE is not an oil-rich nation. Most of their economy is not based on oil anymore, at all. It's based on, you know, financial services, tourism, and they've diversified way beyond oil and natural resources. They don't have much left. And yet they still do not have income tax. I mean, there are certain Caribbean nations that don't have income tax. And as I say, the United States originally had no income tax. So, you do not need income tax necessarily to run a country. Certainly not mandatory income tax. You don't need mandatory income tax at all. That's all a scam. And all government, or most governments, do it because it's easy, right? Because it's like something that citizens worldwide have just accepted as part of life. So from their perspective, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just extort people and do what we want with the money. It's the status quo. Everyone does it. So there you go. It's been going on for centuries. You have to realize that every government basically started out as thugs, right? In many ways, they still are. If you go back, far enough from the Stone Age tribes and all that kind of business and see the way a nation rises up through, being a kingdom and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It starts out as a bunch of thugs, the people who crack skulls, might is right. That's how, in the beginning, all governments and nations and systems are formed. And some of the practices that started out in the very beginning, thousands of years ago, are still extant today, like extortion. Mark Hatch is asking me about Sky Nicholson. I'm not watching that fight, bro. I have no interest in any of that. Matt says, I know it's not got the best reputation, but I'm eligible for Indian citizenship through my wife. Quite tempted to sell up here and get some remote land and start a homestead. India is very cheap. I know that. Very cheap. Juan says, good thing I'm a dual UK-US citizen. Well, if they're both going to be taxing you worldwide, then there's no escape. There's no escape. You better be a dual citizen of somewhere else. E. Daniel says, so like Hatman and vote with your feet. Yeah, you got to go where you're treated best, as Mark Henderson of the Nomad Capitalist likes to say. Go where you're treated best. Afro Jam says the wars people have now, drone airstrikes, nukes, war strips, way worse than shooting arrow and stabbing with flints. Yeah, I take your point. But it's the mentality, innit? The mentality continues, and essentially the same practices continue. Just extorting people. It's the easiest way to raise money for the state, isn't it? Extortion. Just dress it up and call it tax and say, oh, you're doing your bit for the country. It's no different than when the mob used to control the Italian-American communities and strong-arm businesses, racketeering, and I mean, Afro Jam says, would you renounce your UK citizenship? Not currently. I think it's beneficial to have as many citizenships as possible. Afro Jam says some countries don't allow dual. Yeah, they don't, but what they don't know about won't hurt them, right? There are some countries that don't allow dual citizenship. You don't have to declare it. The final boss is asking me about Sam Langford. Yeah. A very accomplished fighter, moving up through the weight classes and doing what he did. They called him the Boston Tar Baby. It's just a crazy name. But yeah, a fantastic fighter. What was he, about 5'6" or 5'7"? He's a little guy, but very muscular, you know? Matt says, just because it arrives as a headed letter rather than a man in a suit, it doesn't make it any less extortion. Indeed. Just because it ain't a man in a suit or a man in a leather jacket with some hitman shades on, some heavies at your door, it's the same thing. Just extorting you out of money and doing whatever they want with it. And saying, oh, we're looking after you. Really? That's why they call extortion, that's why gangs and organized crime call extortion protection money, right? We're protecting you. Yeah. That scam is as old as the hills. Literally. Tom says, what are your thoughts on the Nick Ball kick controversy? Yeah, I spoke about this on a previous live stream. If it was the other way around and Dehaney had kicked Ball, Dehaney probably would have got disqualified, or at least multiple points deducted. Because Ball was the A side, he was allowed to get away with it. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen in a boxing ring, but I've seen fighters get disqualified for things like that. When Riddick Bowe fought Elijah Tillery kicked him, and that ended in, was it a disqualification or a no contest? I forget now. Anyone in the chat remember? In fact, let me look it up on BoxRec now. Let me find out what the official result of that was. It's either a no contest or a disqualification when Elijah Tillery kicked Riddick Bowe. And then Rock Newman, Bowe's manager, jumped up on the ring apron and grabbed Tillery from, round the neck from behind and allowed Riddick Bowe to punch him in the face. It was crazy. The first Tillery fight. Let's have a look here. I'm on Riddick Bowe's BoxRec. Where is the Tillery? The first Tillery fight. Yeah. Tillery was disqualified in the first round for kicking Riddick Bowe. Whereas Nick Ball, he was the A-side fighter, so they were never going to disqualify him, you know? Afro Jam says he should have got DQ'd. Ball absolutely violated. Yeah. Mark Hatch says Nick Ball must be the most protected fighter right now. He throws opponents, hits to the back of the head, and gets no points taken. And, Ball doing all those things is kind of looked over at the moment because he's doing it in fights where he's winning. So it's like people are letting it slide. I'm talking about the public now. The public are letting it slide because they're thinking, well, it wouldn't have made any difference to the result of the fight anyway. But once he starts doing it in a fight that he's losing or a fight that's very competitive, then, the public might turn against him. Not that it's justifiable to do it in any fight. But I'm just saying, in terms of the public reaction to his dirty tactics, it's probably not going to be as bad as it should be until he does it in a fight that he's losing. Juan says it's a Liverpool thing. Mark Hatch says he had close fights with Ford and Vargas. He did, but I don't remember him being particularly dirty in those fights. Certainly not to the extent that he was against Dehaney, for example. But he is hot-headed. He's definitely got the Napoleon syndrome, hasn't he? He's a short, angry little man. And also, speaking of my particular views, just going back to economics for a second, in the UAE, they've implemented a thing where companies, I'm not sure if it's all companies, but certainly companies over a certain size are now getting taxed. But employees are still tax-free, no income tax for them. And so I would advocate something like that. Once your company reaches over a certain size, then maybe start taxing them. But for employees who are earning under a certain amount, and I'm talking about the majority of them, no compulsory income tax, just voluntary taxes. Pay-as-you-go taxes, basically. Matt says, all the hype around Riyadh season has helped to mask the quiet slump that UK boxing is in compared to where it was in 2017, 2018. The amount of world-class boxers we have has fallen off a cliff. Yeah, that's the double-edged sword of Riyadh season, isn't it? Because so many of these events have been happening in Saudi Arabia rather than the UK, and that has contributed to the slump. It has contributed to the slump, there's no doubt. But I say it's a double-edged sword because certain fights simply wouldn't have happened without Saudi involvement. And therefore, those fights taking place in Saudi Arabia itself. But there's certainly been a shift in focus from Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren from the UK, prioritizing the UK, to instead prioritizing shows in Saudi Arabia. And of course, Eddie Hearn also does shows in the United States. Final Boss says Bull versus Inoue is the fight to make now. And that's the fight they seem to be edging towards, right? Nick Bull called Inoue out the other day. Iron Fist says Inoue would smash him. Goozy says, I get PED vibes from Nick Bull. All right, interesting. Kyle says, Liston versus Valuev. Liston. Valuev was rubbish. Valuev was soundly beaten, but somehow got the decision over a cruiserweight, former cruiserweight from Argentina called Marcelo Domingo. Look up Valuev if it's still on YouTube. Valuev versus Marcelo Domingo. I think that was his name. He was an Argentinian cruiserweight who was about 5'10". Let me just double check his name. I'm pretty sure it was Marcelo Domingo. He's about 5'10", and when he fought Valuev, have I got his name wrong? Is it Marcelo Domingo? I might have got his name wrong. Hang on. Or no, or is that his name? Let me see. The same guy. Let me look here. No, I don't think it's Marcelo. What's the guy's name? Let me look up Valuev a second. And we'll find his name on here. Where is the guy now? Valuev got the decision, but it was a shocking decision because this guy beat him more comfortably than David Haye did. Oh, Marcelo Dominguez. Excuse me, not Domingo. Marcelo Dominguez. It was an 8-rounder, and it was given unanimously to Valuev. Folks, if you watch that fight, that was one of the most shocking robberies you'll see. A little 5'10" former cruiserweight who was totally out of shape, fat, boxed up Nikolai Valuev in that fight. That was back in 2004. He weighed 230 pounds for that fight, Dominguez. Valuev was 323, so there was a nearly 100-pound weight difference. And over a foot difference in height. And Dominguez mashed him up. So, yeah, Sonny Liston batters Nikolai Valuev as far as I'm concerned. Nikolai Valuev was rubbish. Indeed, Louis Mensah says Holyfield beat him. Yeah, Holyfield got jobbed against Valuev. Valuev was rubbish. He was just a big guy that looked scary but wasn't actually any good. All right, I've got the usual tab crashing here. You try to revive it. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. All right, we're back in. Afro Jam says Valuev could actually move and fight when he was younger. He has severe gigantism. By the time he became champ, he had a tumor in his skull, presumably a benign tumor, or else he wouldn't be alive, right? So presumably it's like it was benign, not malignant. Iron Fist says Valuev must be one of the scariest humans ever. Slow, but you don't want to get hit by this guy clean. Well, Valuev wasn't actually a big puncher. He certainly didn't punch his weight. He was never really a monster puncher. And you do wonder about a guy like Valuev, whether he was some type of throwback, a genetic throwback to an extinct subspecies of human. I don't want to be disrespectful, but you know, these things might be possible, right? A genetic throwback. There was a different, again, I guess subspecies might be the right way to describe them, of humans called Denisovans or Denisovans. And they were meant to be really big throughout Eurasia, extremely tall and powerfully built. They were not Homo sapiens sapiens. Again, they are an extinct subspecies of human. Was Valuev like a throwback to them? I don't know. Louis Mensah says Valuev would be a good bouncer, and he surely would have worked as a bouncer many times in his life, being that size. Now, Tommy Two Dog says, I remember reading once that Valuev was a poet and a writer outside the ring. Not sure how true that was, though. I think it is true. I think it is true. He was a sensitive, or is kind of a sensitive soul. I remember him saying he doesn't really like boxing and he doesn't like hanging around with boxers, despite his ferocious looks. Kyle says, bro said Valuev is subhuman. I didn't say that at all. I said he might be a throwback to a subspecies. So the human family has many subspecies. Doesn't mean you're subhuman, like less than human. It just means you are a different branch on the human tree. Homo sapiens sapiens being a subspecies. You know, we are a subspecies. JR says, do you have any Patreons on the MH370 missing plane? I don't think so, but there's a lot of funny business going on with that. I've seen like some hoax. You know, there was that like video which purported to show the plane disappearing into thin air through some wormhole or something. And I saw the guy who claimed that that footage was legit, and I don't buy any of it. Seems like grifters. I don't know what did happen to that plane, but yeah, some people coming up with spurious explanations Afro Jam says Denisovans was small. Not from the anthropologists I've heard talk about them. They said they were very big. They examined, obviously they're going off fragments of jawbone and teeth and stuff like that. And based upon that, they were saying they were very big, very tall, like 7 feet tall. And there have always been races, if you want to use that word, of very, very large people. In the Americas, for example, in Southern America, South America, European explorers reported encountering giant natives who are like 7 feet tall. Tuscaloosa, where Deontay Wilder is from, Alabama, that town is actually named after a giant Native American warrior who was said to be like 7 feet tall. And if memory serves me correct, Tuscaloosa actually means black warrior. You know, that the Native Americans like to give themselves, you know, these type of names with the colors involved and all that. But yeah, it's an interesting bit of synchronicity, isn't it? That from Tuscaloosa, another giant, at least in height, would emerge from that little small town and become heavyweight champion. And, you know, just to clarify, when I say giant, we're not talking about like 20 foot, but 7 foot humans. Certainly when the conquistadors arrived in the Americas, the average height apparently for the Spanish at the time for a Spanish man might have been like 5'6", 5'7". So imagine the average Spaniard is 5'6", 5'7", and you're encountering 7 foot natives. They're going to be giants in your eyes, right? Cloud says, after all the shenanigans, I still like Deontay Wilder. It's easier to like him now he's no longer champion holding a belt hostage. But during that period, oh dear, I couldn't like him. Not for what he was doing to boxing. He was exciting as a puncher, but in terms of the way he was running his career and messing about in the heavyweight division, it was awful. Grind says, my cousin is 6'9", I'm 5'9", he makes me look like a midget. Black Dynamite says South Sudan is the real home of the giants. Yeah, they have a lot of very, very tall people there. In certain tribes and ethnic groups, they're far taller than the global average, like extremely tall. And you're talking about Nilotic people. Nilots are how would you describe them? A subgroup of black Africans who are unusually tall, unusually dark, even by African standards. Their skin is unusually dark, hairless. The men, well, both sexes obviously, but even the men will struggle to grow any kind of facial hair and so on. Body hair is almost completely absent. Yeah, Nilotic people, certain, as I say, groups of Nilots grow extremely tall. Okay, Khan says, just tuned in, but random comment, Parker has a better resume than Fury. Black Dynamite says, how would a South Sudanese boxer fare in your opinion? I don't know, man. I'm not sure whether they have the phenotype that would work that well in boxing, because they're not very muscular, Nilotic people generally. And they don't tend to be like, I mean, some of them play basketball, you know, but I don't know whether they've got the right type of athleticism for boxing. But Parker having a better resume than Fury. Parker beat Andy Ruiz. A shot Wilder. Zhang. Bacoli, who took a fight on 2 days' notice. I can't agree with it personally. I can't agree that he's got a better resume. I mean, maybe on paper, but when you actually look at the circumstances and, you know, scratch beneath the surface of those wins that Parker has, I can't say they're as good as Fury's win over Klitschko and Fury's wins over Fury's wins over Wilder, for example. Iron Fist says, no way Parker is better than Fury in terms of resume. I agree with you. I can't make a case personally for Parker having a better resume than Fury. Not when you actually analyze the wins. Grind says, that's facts, Hatman. I'm Ugandan and my cousin is 6'9", and whenever he throws punches, it doesn't look right. He plays basketball. I guess from northern Uganda, right? Because northern Uganda, there's a lot of Nilotic people. Northern Uganda and South Sudan, it's kind of the same people. Don Gorgon says, Parker's on a good run in terms of name, but he hasn't beaten anyone at their best. You hit the nail on the head. Louis Mensa says, John Fury versus Lenny McLean, who would win? In a street fight, I reckon McLean would smash him to bits. But in a boxing match, I might lean towards John Fury because McLean had no stamina at all. So I might lean towards John Fury in a boxing match, but on the cobbles, McLean, I think, would do him. Because McLean would just stick the nut in, and, you know, McLean had a lot of energy when he would attack people. So I want to say McLean would do John Fury on the cobbles. No holds barred. Tony says, does Chisora have a better resume than Wilder? What's Chisora's best win? Takam? Is that his best win? What is Chisora's best win? Oh, Joe Joyce? Okay. Yeah, Hellenius was like an unofficial win because he should have got the decision, but they robbed him blind. Iron Fist says Takam is his best win. Takam was in better shape compared to Joyce. And he was taking a terrible beating against Takam as well. That punch was totally against the run of play when Chisora dropped Takam. He was pretty much pinned in the corner for most of that fight, wasn't he? Getting battered. It was an unreal fight. It was crazy. What was top of the bill? on that card. Was it a Dylan White card? Because Dylan White's cards used to be very good. You know when Dylan White was with Matchroom? He used to have great undercards. Was that White Rivas that Chisora Takam was on? Or was it White Parker? Okay, Ocean Blue says it was White Parker. But Dylan White used to stack his undercards. They were great value for money, Dylan White cards, for a while. Cloud says, I would like to know where Fury's record sits after the 2 Usyk losses. Is he the second best of this era? Well, Frank Warren would like you to think so, but we really won't know unless Fury gets involved and starts fighting some of these contenders. And that's probably why Fury won't do that, because he's scared now that if he can't convince people that he was robbed in the 2 Usyk fights, if he were to lose to somebody else, he wouldn't even be able to claim the number 2 spot. This is how Fury thinks. That's why he's quote-unquote retired. No, this silly nonsense. He hasn't retired. He's going to be back. He's just biding his time looking for the right fight. As far as risk-reward, right? That's what he's doing. Black Dynamite says Fury won't mix it up with any of the other guys. I guarantee that. And I fear that you're right. Mark Hatch says Fury versus AJ is going to happen, I think. Both are washed. Although I think AJ is more washed than Fury. Ayed says, Hatman, do you ever think that Howard Foster was right to stop the Froch-Groves fight? It wasn't as bad a stoppage in retrospect as we felt it was at the time, but I still don't think it was the right thing to do. I think he should have let it go on a little bit longer. But because it was such a good fight, and because Groves did what he said he was going to do, pre-fight, throw 2 right hands and then drop Carl Froch, right? People wanted to see a more conclusive ending. So it was a bit premature, but maybe we went a little bit over the top at the time because, yeah, of how good the fight was. Tommy Two Dog says, why do Traveler fighters like Fury and Saunders basically age themselves out? They are doing themselves a disservice. Well, I forget who it was. It might have been Peter Fury. But there was some Traveler who was basically interviewed many, many moons ago about why Traveler fighters haven't been more successful in the pros than they have been. Because in the amateurs, Travelers have been, I don't want to say dominating, but they've been very, very successful in the amateurs for decades, long before the Tyson Furies came along. But in the pros, they never really replicated that same level of success. And whoever it was that did the interview was so long ago, I've forgotten who it was, but I just remember what was said. And he said that basically the lifestyle that a lot of travelers lead is just not conducive to success in professional boxing. You know, bad diet, constantly drinking, getting into trouble and beefs and scrapes with other travelers. They basically lack the discipline, is what he was saying, to succeed in the professional game. And since that time, obviously, you've had the likes of Billy Joe Saunders and Tyson Fury, who have been successful in the pro game, but again, not as successful as they might have been had they been more disciplined, particularly Fury, who is a great talent, but yeah, didn't have the discipline to take his talent as far as he could have done. Joe says Fury won't fight Dubois. Triple knee would sleep Fury. I'd like to see the fight, but I agree he won't fight him. I mean, you even heard Shane Fury say that he doesn't want Tyson to fight Daniel Dubois. And even Frank Warren kind of dismissing that fight. Don Gorgon says, Joshua definitely more washed than Fury, but he's less terrified of losing. That might be the difference. And that is a good point. AJ is less terrified of losing. That's right. Although he's not that keen on going back in against Dubois anytime soon, but he seems keen to go in against many other fighters who are dangerous. So yeah, I would agree with that. I think AJ at this stage probably feels like he's got nothing to lose. Probably thinks his reputation is destroyed now anyway after what's happened to him, so he's not bothered about risking another loss. B says, Joshua Wilder should have happened 7 years ago when they were on top. It's irrelevant now. I agree. Both Matt and Ocean Blue are saying Fury was a massive underachiever. Yeah, I concur with that. Black Dynamite says the only way is up for AJ. The only way is up. Who sang that song back in the night? Was it the 90s or the late 80s? The only way is up. Was it Yaz? I used to think that Bern Bonte, I still do, the former manager of the Klitschko's looked like Yaz. Bern Bonte looks like Yaz. Afro Jam says Fury is just as washed. The weak-ass opponents he fought as champion is an indication. Well, Fury's always been careful about who he fights, even when he wasn't washed. So I'm not sure that's an indication, or, well, it might be an indication, but I'm not sure it's an indication that convinces me just yet that he's as washed as AJ is. You know, confidence goes a long way, and Fury is still more confident in the ring than Anthony Joshua. So wherever Fury is physically, his confidence helps him. Grind says, I still think Fury has 2 years left at world level. Black Dynamite says Bunty looks like that chick who was dating Flavor Flav for a while. Yeah, Bunty looks like a les. I won't say the full word. He looks like a les, right? Like a German les feminist or something. That's what Bunty looks like. Brandon asking what are traveler fighters. I'm assuming you're from the United States. So there is a, I guess you could call them an ethnic group in the UK called Irish travelers. Now, or some people call them gypsies, and sometimes they call themselves gypsies. But they're split basically into two groups. You've got Romani gypsies, who originate from the European continent, and if you go further back than that, originate from India, apparently, right? And so you've got Romani gypsies, and then you've got Irish travelers, who are descendants of people who moved to the UK from Ireland in decades or centuries gone by. and banded together because they were being persecuted by the British state, and some even say the British public. And they have a culture which is distinct from mainstream British culture. They live, not all of them, but many of them, in communities separate from others, on campsites where they live in what Americans will call trailers. And many of them, even though they're born in the UK, they speak with a form of an Irish accent. It's not exactly like an Irish accent, but it's some form of Irish accent is what they speak with. Okay, so that just gives you an indication of how separate they are culturally from mainstream society in Britain. But they'll speak with this kind of Irish cant and use Irish terms and stuff like that. And yeah, they just have a different culture. They're into like buying and selling stuff and hustling and buying horses and selling horses and all sorts of other stuff, you know, that mainstream British people are not engaged in. And one of the things, of course, that they have a long tradition of, Irish travelers in Britain, is bare knuckle fighting. So in their community, they still regularly have bare knuckle fights amongst themselves for money. That's still a big thing in the traveler community. Black Dynamite says BGS is a Romani gypsy, right? Yeah, apparently so. He does rep Romani, and he carries their flag into the ring and whatnot. Afro Jam says he got mashed up by Ngannou and Usyk. We have no idea what his confidence is. He won't show his face. Well, he was very confident in both Usyk fights, so I would disagree with that. Ngannou, he just didn't turn up. He wasn't in any kind of shape, didn't train. It was clear as day to me. Against Usyk, he fought confidently both times. I mean, maybe not as confidently as he should have, but again, look at Fury's performances and compare them to AJ's performances against Usyk. Particularly the first fight. AJ had no confidence in the first fight with Usyk at all. Whereas Fury fought more confidently, more flamboyantly, and did more damage as far as I'm concerned in that first fight in the mid-rounds than AJ did against Usyk. I know Usyk was marked up after the first AJ fight, but to me, he was never noticeably bothered to the extent, anyway, that he was in the first Fury fight by any of AJ's punches. Afro Jam says, helping you fly tip. They are cool, but don't step on their toes or many will be out for your neck. Yeah, I've known a couple of travelers over the years, and you can be cool with them, you know, through boxing. I knew quite a few travelers, and you can be cool with them, but I wouldn't do business with them. Let's just put it that way. I wouldn't do business with them. I would be very wary about getting involved in any kind of business transaction with them. Not that they're all dodgy in that way, but some of them are, and they see, some of them see non-travelers as food. All right, peeps, it's time to draw the curtain on this one. Shout out to everybody who participated in the conversation. It's been enjoyable as always. Special shout out to everyone who contributed via Super Chat. Thanks for watching. Until next time, be safe, be good, and I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.